it's interesting because the polling was so mixed. There was an AP poll yesterday where something like 70% of people are in the US are extremely or very worried about gas prices. But then they asked the same question of, hey, how worried are you about Iran obtaining nuclear weapons? And something, a very similar amount, like 70%, said yes, they're very concerned about that. So it's it's tough to reconcile those two things.
It is. I mean, and it's a big issue for Trump. You've got midterms coming up here later this year, and if this is ongoing for another month or 2 or 3, that's not good. And as far as opinion in the midterms, and that's why I think Trump is saying, look, either you come to the table, either we get something done, or come, this weekend we're going to bomb the hell out of you. I mean, if they don't come to the table, I think that's coming. He doesn't mess around. I mean, what he says, he means, and he doesn't want this to drag on. They want to just pull full force and get this over with, and bring whoever's in power to the table to get a deal done. And it's still not clear who he's talking to.
Yeah, every time I see those news stories, I think of the time that there's always, and I thought it was Russian, but there's always a radio joke host that calls up different like prime ministers or presidents and pretends to be another prime minister, and then they broadcast it. I'm like, I'm hoping that we're not negotiating with some Russian-based DJ.
Well, the other thing you worry too is what he said on Monday. He said, look, I don't want to tell you who it is because that person doesn't want to be killed. And you don't want to come in tomorrow and say, Mr. President, how the negotiations going? And not so good. Our person got killed.
Yeah, so, you definitely don't want to get getting promotions are great. But the last thing you want to do is be in the Iranian Republican Army and get a promotion at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bob, is there anything on the curve that looks interesting to you either way? I know oil vol's high. Do you think that would you be selling puts at some point, or do would you sell calls, or where? Is there anything you would do, like just looking at the curve, like independent of stocks?
Not right now. I mean, it's just too much uncertainty. It could go either way. Like we've said, oil's not going back to $60 or $70 a barrel anytime soon. And I think the market reflects that. And I think the stocks know that. That's why when you get a big move down in oil prices like you did yesterday, the stocks really don't move down. And again, the risk is that something happens and drives the oil price even higher, and then the stocks continue to climb. I don't want to cap my upside yet. Yes, they've had a big move, but I'm not writing puts or calls either way right here.
It's a weird thing because, what my insight on this is that, and I like to call this Adult Swim, is all the traditional hedges aren't working right now. And so the only real hedge against this scenario is oil. So you wonder, how much energy upside is there that's from hedging, right? Because if my gold's getting banged and my bonds are getting hit, and I think bonds are getting hit, everyone thinks inflation expectations, but I think it's really a liquidity thing. Where's the money to buy the bonds? And so we need more premium. And then, it hits equities. And, even within equities, staples and that stuff isn't really doing its job. So it's a weird environment because when you see oil move this fast, your natural inclination is to say, hey, I want to fade it. But given the situation, no one really knows. I think this is a paralyzed market right now. I don't hear anyone. Do you guys have either any conviction? And I usually have conviction, and I don't have a lot of conviction here at all either way, to be honest. I think the independent factors of the market are kind of negative. I think the labor market, I think the AI stuff is going to be a challenge in the labor market. I think the credit stuff, but these are known things. So, the war's a known thing. So it's a weird, what do you think, David?
Yeah, I mean, this is what we were talking right before the show, that it's politics and it's global events, and none of us have any edge on that. We know that it will eventually be over. but could it get very worse before it gets better? Absolutely. Could it be over relatively soon? Yes. Does that mean there's a snapback? Then you go through all the economic data. Well, if there is a snapback snapback meaning oil prices drop, does that all of a sudden mean the market goes up? Or do we start looking at the other data of employment and the rest and what happens to rates? So we just turn our attention to something else. So there's a lot of crosswinds going on. I mean, you had asked Bob the question of like, well, is there anything to do? And you thought that oil and gas was the only hedge. I will say XLV and XBI doing very well yesterday, doing very well today in a down market. Those are the two ETFs that are most of healthcare, meaning therapeutics healthcare. And one is XBI is the biotech and XLV is overall healthcare. They're up today. Is it good to have some exposure to things that kind of set whatever prices they want and have a built-in market? Probably. In a time like this, it's like almost like gold in that they can print money even in bad times. And the attention is off the industry right now. So, I still like those going forward, whether we resolve things or not. I think money's coming into it because of the war. Maybe that changes a little bit temporarily, but overall it's been under-owned. And but I hear you, Ben, which is, it's not a lot to do. It's not like you could go, well, this is the thing.
And the thing too is if there's some sort of deal tomorrow or say, look, we're going to open the Strait of Hormuz, maybe oil pulls back to $80 a barrel. That's still going to underpin higher inflation than you had 2 months ago or a month ago.
Yeah.
And this all plays into this affordability issue. And affordability is the key thing that's driving the politics. And if you look at some of these, what happened in Mar-a-Lago with the Democrat winning the Florida House seat, it was all about affordability. And so that's going to continue to be an issue. And again, oil's not going back to 60. So that affordability is only getting worse, even if we got a deal tomorrow, because oil's not going back to 60. Maybe it goes to 80, maybe 75. But still, prices at the pump are higher than they were a month or two ago. And that's putting more pressure on the average American as far as their spending in their budget.